Alright everyone, hello and welcome. Today we're going to do 5 shapes from the No-Knead dough that we've been using. We have a panned loaf that was made in a loaf pan, a focaccia, which is an Italian flatbread, a Fougasse, which is a leaf-shaped French flatbread, some Ficelles or rustic baguettes, and then also a pizza crust. So let's get started. Hello everyone and welcome. So today we are making a no-knead bread in a loaf pan, which will give you this shape of bread. Just, looks like something you can slice into slices, all even, not like the last one where you have to kind of cut it in half. So it's a really easy way to make like a sandwich loaf for your family if you need to. Uses the same dough that we used for the other no-knead bread last week, and we're also going to use that same dough. I'm going to show you later in the video a few different ways you can shape that same dough. You can do a fougasse, which is like leaf shape. You can do a focaccia, which is like a flatbread that you poke some holes into and you can put some toppings on. Very delicious. There's also a rustic baguette. We're going to do actual baguettes later, but these are like knife cut, like they're not rolled or anything like that. And then one more thing is a pizza crust, which I actually did make in my pizza video that I made earlier on this channel. So I'm going to show you how to shape all those later in this video and then show you the final results. So it's basically the same dough you're using. Once you get up to the step where it's done rising, then you can shape it in these different ways. So this one, as opposed to last week, was shaped in a loaf pan, not just in a proofing basket and then put into a Dutch oven. This one was shaped in a loaf pan. We're going to do the pizza crust, the rustic baguettes, the fougasse, the leaf shape, and then the focaccia. So we're going to do all those after we're done making this loaf. So stay tuned for that at the end. All right, so for this week, we are going to be doing a no-knead bread in a loaf pan. Hi, Chazzy. Hi. So you need a loaf pan this week if you want to make this bread. It is, the size technically is 9 by 5 by 3, I believe, is what you want. And then not much else. Mixing bowl, we're going to mix in here. I'm going to let it rise in here. We don't need a banneton or a proofing container whatsoever. We're just going to proof it in the pan and then just put the pan in the oven. So you don't need anything special there at all. We're going to be using the same recipe, 500 grams of either all-purpose flour or bread flour. I have bread here. 10 grams of salt and 8 grams of yeast. And then we're going to measure the water together. So we're going to be measuring 375 grams of water. But the rest of it I had pre-measured. Then pretty much the same as last week until we get to the point where you proof the dough, because it's going to proof in here instead of a banneton. So I'm going to go through that process a little more quickly in this video than I did in the last video, and I'll give you timestamps for that video if you want more of an explanation of something, in case you haven't watched that one. But I suggest you watch the whole thing. But anyway, let's get started. All right, water, 375 grams. 375 grams of water. All right, then I'm going to add the yeast to the water. And I'm going to give it a little stir with a whisk to get it stirred in. And this is instant yeast, not after dry yeast, so I don't have to really let it do anything, but I'm going to let it rest a little bit so that it just dissolves. All right, that looks pretty good. I am going to add my flour. And then the salt, a little bit separated from the yeast and the water right now, because we don't want it to do anything to that. You don't want that to interact directly with that. I'm gonna get my plastic scraper ready if you have one to help get the dough off my hands. And then I'm just going to mix. All right, now I'm going to scrape off the dough from my hands. And I'm going to scrape off the bowl and get that all incorporated together down there. Alright, so I'm going to let this rest now for about 20 minutes and then we're going to do some folds. And I'm going to put the lid on it while it rests. Alright, so now we're going to do some folds. So I said in my last video, you imagine your bowl is like a clock. So this is 12, this is 3, this is 6, and this is 9. So what we're going to do is go around the clock, at each quarter of the clock, 2 or 3 times. I usually do 3. And then we'll see how it looks after that. It's usually pretty good by then. So I'm going to fold the top down, turn my bowl, fold the top down, turn my bowl, fold the top down, so on and so forth around the clock. So here we go. And once it starts getting bulkier, you have to kind of stretch it out a little bit. Otherwise you're not going to be able to fold anything. Alright, so that is looking pretty good. It's pretty solid. It's got a little bit of shape to it. You can tell that the gluten is developing. So now we're going to let this rise for an hour and a half. I'm going to cover it back up again. Move it to the center a little. Cover it back up again, and now we're going to let it rise for an hour and a half. It should be doubled in size. Alright, so it is done rising. Let's take a look at it. Looks pretty good. Now, I'm going to be dusting the surface with the counter surface with some flour. And we're going to take this out, and we're going to shape it pretty much the same as we did last time. Do the letter folds, top to middle, bottom to middle, and then right to middle, left to middle. So you have kind of a rounded square shape. So we're going to be doing that. I need to dust my countertop. And then the other thing we need to do, so again, we're cooking this in a loaf pan. I need to grease the pan. So I'm going to do that as well. But I'll do that after I do this. So let me get this out of here. Use my scraper. Scrape it out. Like that. And now again, so I'm going to do my folds. It's a little sticky on top here. Down to the center, and the bottom up to the center, and then pinch the seams, and then right over to the center, and left over to the center, and pinch, having trouble speaking, pinch the seams again. All right, and I'm going to let this rest a little bit while I grease the pan, but we're going to put that in there pretty much right away as soon as that's done, so. Let me grease this up. Let me wash my hands. Can't really see what I'm doing here. Greased. Okay. Let me wash my hands again real quick. Seam side down. Pick this up, so I'm going to flip it over, pan. Now it's gonna proof in the pan. So it should rise all ways to reach the sides, and then it's gonna kind of mushroom up on the top. So I'm gonna set this aside. I'm gonna clean this up real quick, and then I'm gonna put a little flour on top and then put something over it so that it can proof in peace. Although what I could do is put it in the microwave instead of covering it up. I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm not cooking it in the microwave, I'm just putting it in there. All right, so I'm gonna put this in. Gonna check on it after a little bit because it might be less than an hour and a half. So I'm gonna put this in here so I can let it rise in there, proof. All right, so I put that in the microwave to proof, just so I don't mess with, you know, having to cover it. I think that's a better choice for this one. Now I'm also going to be preheating the oven this time to 375, so it's a little less. I forgot to mention earlier, we don't have to do this right now, pretty soon though. You don't have to, it's optional, but you can do an egg wash on the top of your loaf. If you don't do an egg wash, they recommend at least brushing a little water on top of your loaf before you bake it. This will help not have such a hard top on your loaf when you cook it, so it'll be a little softer. So for the egg wash, it's 1 egg and 2 tablespoons of milk. All right, so an egg and 2 tablespoons of milk for the egg wash. Kind of a small dish, but I want to use a bigger one. That's pretty good. All right. I'm just gonna put that in the fridge for now. Preheat the oven. And that'll help with the heat too in the microwave, so that'll be good. All right, it's time to check the loaf. It's looking pretty good. Let's do the poke test. All right, so first the poke test. So what I'm gonna do is poke a hole in the side here. And you see how it doesn't come back up? That means it's ready. Try to flatten that out a little bit. All right, so now I'm gonna do the egg wash. Let me just, one more look, kind of, there's a big mushroom coming up. Not that big, but it'll come up a little more in the oven. But you know, it filled out all the sides here, now it's going up. So looking pretty good. All right, so just gonna slather this on here. Again, you can use water if you want instead, if you don't have an egg and milk. But we just want to keep the crust kind of softer than that other bread that we made, because this is more of a sandwich type, like you know, softer sandwich bread. And we're going to bake this for 45 minutes on 375, but after 20 minutes we're going to check it and see if it starts browning too much. We're supposed to put like some foil over it so that it doesn't brown too much the rest of the time. So I'm gonna check it at 20 minutes. It's way more egg wash than we needed. I'll probably save that for something else. So anyway, I'm gonna put this in the oven for 45 minutes. I'm gonna put it on for 20 now so we can check it at 20 and then another 25 afterwards. Here we go. All right, I took a peek just a minute ago. It's not really browning that much, so I'm gonna keep an eye on it. I don't think I need foil because it's not really getting too dark yet, but I'm gonna keep an eye on it, like I said, and if I need to put foil on, I will let you know. All right, it is still starting to get a little brown now because it's supposed to be golden brown in the end, so this is pretty close to what it's supposed to be. So I'm gonna take it out, pause the time, put some foil on it, and put it back in. Let's do that. All right, so like I said, it's kind of getting that golden brown already. Wrong door. So I'm supposed to put foil over it. I haven't done this one in a while. And now I'm going to do the other loaves. Protect my hands a little bit here. Make a little bit of a tent. That should be good. All right, I'm going to put that in. All right, it's reveal time. That looks pretty good. Nice and golden brown, not too dark. Now I want to get this out on my little cooling rack here, which is my cutting board that allows for air. How do I want to do this? I need some protection here. Wait, maybe I can do it this way. These are clean, they just have a little flour on them. It's a little awkward. Look at that. Actually, let me... Yep, sounds nice and hollow. There we go. Looks pretty good. See? All right, now I'm gonna let it cool for 30 minutes and then we'll cut into it and see what it looks like. All right, this is gonna be a do as I say and not as I do thing. I have to break into this loaf a little earlier than the 30 minutes. So you should let it cool for 30 minutes, but I'm kind of on a time crunch today, so I'm gonna just do it now. Let's see what it looks like. Looking pretty good, a little steamy because it's not done cooling. But see, now you can just slice that into slices. I'll do a few of those so you can see. Because it's not cool all the way, it's kind of difficult to do. I'll try to not squish it too much. But they are nice. There's a little bit of a hard crust on it, but it's not as hard as the other bread that I made. So this is like a softer bread, but it's not quite as soft as like a white bread you would buy in the store. I don't actually have a good recipe for that. I'd like to find one, but this is pretty close to that. That one's a little iffy. That one's also a little iffy, but you get the idea. So I want to show you a few of these slices here. Let's not put that one on the bottom. It's not as good. All right. Presentation. So I'm gonna take a few glamour shots, but here, how's that look? All right, so the first extra shape here is the focaccia. It's a flatbread that you can put toppings on. And I just put some garlic on mine for this time. And again, we are using the same dough here for all of these recipes, including the one from last week, the no-knead dough. But first you're going to oil a sheet pan or a cake pan, something like that. And then also oil the top of your dough after you turn it out onto the pan. And then just basically flatten it out into a rectangle shape. As flat as you can make it and as big as you can make it. And then use your fingertips to poke little dimples in the dough. But be careful not to poke too hard or too much because you want some of those air bubbles still in your dough. And this one doesn't really need to proof, but you can let it rest while you let your oven preheat. So you're going to preheat your oven to 475. And the other thing about focaccia is it does need the steam, so you need to get another pan, another shallow pan, and put some water in it and put that on the bottom of the oven, and that will steam it up for a bit. And then put your focaccia in the oven, and then you're going to bake it for 10 minutes with the steam, and then for another 10 or 15 after the steam is taken out. And it's basically until your focaccia is golden brown all around. And then let it cool for at least 20 minutes this time, and then you can cut it into squares or whatever pieces you want, and enjoy. As you can see, I enjoyed mine. Alright, the next one is a Fougasse. That's a leaf-shaped, sort of similar to the Focaccia, but it's a French version, and they do it in a leaf shape. That's how they do it over in France. So, this is actually the third try that I've done with this one, and I've done better every time. Pretty happy with this one because the holes in mine the last couple times didn't really stay there. They kind of coagulated together, so I'm glad that I got the holes correct on this one. But again, you're going to grease a sheet pan of some sort. I'm using a pizza pan for mine. Oil the dough as well. And then you're going to just make a rough leaf shape with a wider bottom and a narrower top, but all rounded. And just try to flatten that out as much as possible. Stretch it out as much as possible that you have room for on your pan. And then you can use either a pizza cutter or a knife or even your bench scraper, your metal bench scraper that I said earlier. But you want to cut a hole down the center, a line. And bear with me here, I know it looks a little vulgar, but we're going to be spreading the hole out further, if that makes sense, along the center there. And again, you do want to make this hole pretty big because it's going to grow together otherwise. I learned my lesson. And then along each side of the leaf, you want to make the little veins that come out from that center line. So just cut a few diagonal lines towards the top of the leaf, but also going out towards the sides of the leaf. So upper and to the sides. And then you're going to spread those holes out too. Again, make them as big as possible, otherwise they're going to grow together. And just like with the focaccia, you can top it with whatever you want. So the recipe in the book has rosemary and lemon zest. That's what I used. Didn't have any fresh rosemary though, I had to use dried, but still turned out okay. But you can use whatever you want. Garlic, there's all kinds of things you can top it with. And you want to preheat your oven to 450. You don't need steam for this. And then you're going to bake for 20 to 25 minutes until it's golden brown again. And it also says in the book that Fougasse is best eaten hot as you can stand it, so you don't have to let it cool at all if you don't want to. And yes, this was also very yummy. Next are the rustic baguettes, or the ficelles. These are not my favorite. I only made them once before. And, I mean, they came out better this time than they did the first time. But they are rustic. They're meant to look a little rough. But I just rather make regular baguettes, which we are going to make eventually on this channel. But this is just an example that was in the book, another shape that you can do very easily. You can whip out some rustic baguettes in, a shorter amount of time than it takes to make regular baguettes. So if that's what you want to do, that's what you can do here. And for this one again, you're going to oil a baking sheet again. Now I actually end up using 2 of these smaller ones because the bigger one I was using for the focaccia, and I made these all the same day. So the small one's kind of not enough room for the whole thing, just so you know. But anyway, you oil your sheet or sheets, and then you put the dough down, and then you cut it into roughly 6 equal pieces. Now mine had 2 on the end there that were kind of smaller, and those turned out to be, in the end, you'll see, a little bit more well done than the others. So try to keep them the same size if possible. You can always weigh the dough if you want to be entirely precise. And then once you get them all cut and separated out, again, I had to separate mine onto 2 different sheet pans so I'd have enough room. You can let them proof for 30 to 45 minutes. And you're going to want to preheat your oven to 475. And then just bake them 20 to 25 minutes until they're golden brown again. And you can cool them for 30 minutes. And again, no steam needed with these either. And as I said, those first 2, the ones on the right there, were kind of smaller than the rest, and they turned out a little more well done, like I said. And you can also cut them laterally or horizontally, kind of like a sub sandwich. And you can make a sub sandwich with them, or what I ended up doing with these is made garlic breadsticks or garlic bread to go with our pizza that we're making next. And I used, you're going to see in the bonus videos at the end of this video, that I made homemade butter. So that's what I put on these. I made a homemade garlic butter, actually, technically. You're going to see in the bonus how I made that. And the pizza crust, so the same amount of dough that we've been using for all these other breads makes 2 pizza crusts. So you can cut it in half with a dough scraper like that, or a knife, pizza cutter, whatever you want to use. Just cut it in half. Again, you can weigh them if you want them to be more precise, but I just eyeballed it for mine. And so for these, you want to pre-shape them. So basically, you want to roll them into kind of a ball and then kind of flatten out that ball, make a flattened disc shape for a pre-shape. Now I ended up freezing one of these, but if you're making both or one, you would let these rest for a little bit, like 30 minutes, while you preheat your oven. You're going to preheat it to 450. Now you're going to see I ended up actually failing with this pizza crust a bit. Turned out okay in the end. It just kind of stuck to the pizza stone, which is what I used, and that's what's recommended in the book. I used my pizza peel and my pizza stone. I probably should have used just a regular sheet pan like I was using for everything else, and I also probably should have pre-baked the crust, which isn't in the instructions technically in the book, but I learned I should do that. But anyway, following the directions in the book, first of all, if you're using a baking stone for your pizza, you need to preheat that with the oven. So put it in the oven, get them both preheated to 450 degrees. And then if you're using a pizza peel, you can shape it right on the peel. Make sure you oil it first. Otherwise, you can use a sheet pan like we did with the other doughs and oil that. But then you're just kind of spreading out the pizza dough onto whatever you are using to bake, or to transfer it onto the stone, like the pizza peel. And then make a little rim of crust around the end. Now, the book doesn't say anything about this, but I do this usually when I make a pizza. I just didn't do it this time in the video. I recommend pre-baking your crust. So put it in the oven, whatever you're using again to bake it on. Put it in for about 5, maybe even 10 minutes. Just so that it's like the outside is baked and so it doesn't stick because it's not wet. You know what I mean? And then bring it back out and put your toppings on, and then put it back in the oven until the toppings get cooked and the crust is golden brown. Now, what I ended up doing, because again mine was kind of a fail, I took mine out because it kind of got stuck on the stone, and was able to get it out, put it on a baking sheet, which I should have done to begin with probably, and then put it back in the oven on the baking sheet for a couple more minutes and finished cooking the pizza. It turned out fine. It was just a little misshapen by the end. Alright, so first I'm going to show you how I made the homemade butter. So you just need heavy whipping cream, and preferably a stand mixer like this, because otherwise your hand is going to get very tired. And I'm eventually going to explain this process in more detail in a different video. I'm going to do some homemade dairy stuff on my channel, but for right now, basically you just keep whipping the cream until it gets to the point where it's butter. It takes a while, but you'll go through a stage where it gets thicker and it's like whipped cream. And at that stage, if you wanted to make whipped cream, you could add sugar to it, powdered sugar, and make whipped cream out of it. But again, you just keep whipping it from this stage and it will turn into something that looks like butter, solid chunks, and then it'll have some liquid on the bottom, which is technically buttermilk. But that is not cultured buttermilk. It's just the milk that's left over from making butter. It doesn't have the same kind of properties as regular buttermilk that you would buy in a store. We'll talk about that more on our dairy video when I get there. But anyway, once it's done, it's separated again from the liquid. You're going to strain out the liquid, get all the solid parts. So I use just a colander, and then just kind of squish all the solid together, try to get all the liquid out as possible. You can give it a rinse too, try to get all the liquid out. And then I ended up adding some garlic salt to mine because, again, I made garlic bread with it, with those rustic baguettes. So we ended up making that with the pizza that night. And then just make sure you store the rest in an airtight container and consume ASAP or freeze. And alright, I do have some of my beginner versions of these breads back in my archives here. So this was week 4. I did the loaf pan version of the No-Knead bread that we did in this video. And as you can see, it turned out pretty similar to this time. And then week 5, January 30th, did the focaccia and another pizza crust. The focaccia turned out okay. I just think I needed to spread it out a little more because it was a little puffy before I even put it in the oven, as you can see. But it turned out pretty similar to what I had today. And then the pizza crust, I didn't get much footage of this. This is the only picture, but you get the idea. Pretty similar to today. And this one actually turned out well. We cooked it on the grill instead. And then week 6, February 6th, I did the Ficelles, the rustic baguettes. Like I said, not my favorite thing, and these turned out okay. The ones I did today were better. But I also had made a video back then, a little bread ASMR for you. Here you go. Alright, so this was week 7, February 13th. My first attempt at a Fougasse. As you can see, like I said, I didn't really spread out the holes that time, so that's how it turned out. Like, the holes all grew together. And then, as I said in the description, I made another pan loaf that week, so that's what this is. They all look pretty similar, pretty consistent. And then in week 24, I did another Fougasse. This was in June. And as you see in my description there, and you'll see in the pictures, the right side was a little puffier than the left. It was uneven shaped. So the right side grew back together a little more, but I did make the holes bigger that time. It's just that the right side was a little puffier. So I corrected that this time. The rustic baguettes. The, where am I? The Ficelles. No, that's what that is. Alright, so for this bread, same as last week, same dough. 500 grams of flour, excuse me. Shut up! Stop! Shut up! Chazzy! Chazzy! Hey! Shut up! Shut up! I'll take you out later. Shut up. Okay. And then we're going to measure the water together, 375 degrees. Ooh, it's warm. Okay.